Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 26th of April of 2024. Today we have significant number of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Очеретино direction. We have lots of updates, so let's discuss, and first let's talk about Очеретино. According to information we have, the Russians as a result of offensive operation managed to establish complete control over the territory. This area, the control over this territory wasn't confirmed by any sources. We just added this just to give the best understanding at the beginning of the video. We have a lot of mappers confirm the same situation. According to pro-Russian sources, the Russians as a result of offensive operation managed to enter the gardens, this let's say part of Очеретино direction, and to get as close as possible to the village Arkhangelsk itself. Some Russian sources reported that the Russians started already clashes among the first buildings of Arkhangelsk, but this information still hasn't been confirmed by any sources. Different mappers start updating their maps, the Russians, the pro-Russian mappers, the pro-Ukrainian mappers, the neutral mappers. So once again, most likely Очеретино has fallen, and most likely tomorrow the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation will provide us the final confirmation that this territory is from now on under complete Russian control. Very interesting details are coming from Novokalinovo ceramic. As we can see, the progress on this direction is not so big and not so, let's say, impressive as in direction of Очеретино, but anyway the Russians managed to improve their positions along Stepova, let's say, street. They managed to cross Pershatravneva улица and basically to start clashes in the vicinity of this water reservoir or small lake. And as we discussed in the previous updates, if we summarize everything, if we project the further Russian movements, we see that on the western flank the Russians are moving to Arkhangelsk in direction of these fields, and the same story we can see from Stepova street, from Novokalinovo. The Russians are trying to bypass ceramic from the east and also to get as close as possible to the same fields, and this situation can force the Ukrainians to fall back. Of course, if the Ukrainians are smart, they should have already started this process to retreat, to fall back from the ceramic Novokalinovo, but according to updates and according to information we have, currently the Ukrainians are completely disorganized. There is very big problems of communication between the parts, between the squads, between brigades. So very likely and most likely not every single Ukrainian soldier will be able to abandon his positions in ceramic Novokalinovo, and according to my understanding and according to my estimates, if the situation with gardens in Arkhangelsk will be confirmed, if the situation with Novokalinovo is confirmed, then most likely up to 200-300 of Ukrainian soldiers will be encircled between ceramic, Novokalinovo and Очеретино, which is also a very big disaster for the Ukrainians. Now let's move to the south. We received significant number of updates of Selydove. As you can see, we have adjusted and colored the map because we received at least 2-3 videos confirming the Russian progress and Russian control in the eastern part of the village, in the southern part of the village, and of course in the western part of the village. On this video we can see the building and we can see the Russian flag raising, let's say, on the roof of that building, which confirms the Russian progress and the Russian control over the territory. Furthermore, the Ukrainian sources published the video of this bus station, and according to video, if you have access you can watch the video till the end. There were Russian soldiers and this bus stop was under attack of Ukraine FPV drones, which also confirms the Ukrainian progress Russian progress and Russian control over the territory. Once again, most of the mappers have already updated their maps showing this territory under complete Russian control. And this is another big disaster for the Ukrainians, and the main problem for the Ukrainians in this situation that they lost possibilities to, let's say, use Selydove for evacuation. So we will discuss just in a minute what kind of evacuation I'm talking about, but before that let's move to the fields and to the foothold between Novobakhmutovka, Selydove and Berdychi. As you can see, we also have some flags. Once again, most of the mappers confirmed the additional Russian progress in the area, including pro-Ukrainian deep state, and pro-Russians are saying that the Russians had much bigger progress further to the fields, to the let's say west of this foothold. But everything, if we summarize everything, according to pro-Russian pro-Russian, pro-Ukrainian and neutral mappers, currently the Russians control something like this on the direction, which is significant progress and significant result of the armed forces of Russian Federation. Most of the Ukrainians have already abandoned their positions, and most of the Ukrainians moved in direction of the town by the name of Novopokrovskaya, and then in direction of the town by the name of Novoselovka-Pershe, and some of Ukrainian soldiers abandoned their positions in Semenivka and Berdychi and moved further to the west in direction of Umanskaya. And as you can see, according to geolocations, according to updates, currently the Ukrainians are trying to hold the Russians along this line, and they will try to do everything they can but to slow down the Russians. But this is not something like a perfect foothold for further defense operation. This is disaster, this is the trap, and this is the situation where the Ukrainians can lose up to a few thousand soldiers, because these few thousand soldiers are no longer available to evacuate from the line, from the artillery pocket between Novoselovka-Pershe, Mezhovo, Skuchno and Umanskaya. Why I'm telling this? Why I'm telling you this? First of all, during the previous update, we have already discussed this video, and on this video we can see how the Russians destroyed the bridge that connected Kamyshivka and Mezhovo, and from now on the Ukrainians are no longer available to use this bridge for redeployment of their armored vehicles, tanks, and evacuation of the armored vehicles from one side on another. If we increase the numbers of updates since the beginning of April, we're gonna see that, for example, in Umanskaya, just on the 6th of April, the Russians destroyed another bridge that Ukrainians were using to supply and support their forces in this artillery pocket. The bridge was destroyed, and from 16th of April, the Ukrainians lost their possibilities to support their forces, to bring munition, to bring reinforcement reserves in the same artillery pocket. Furthermore, if we move a little bit to the southwest to Karlovka water reservoir, we're gonna see another bridge that was destroyed by the Russians. That was Karlovka reservoir dam. The dam was destroyed, then there was the flood in the area. So anyway, the Ukrainians lost their possibilities to use this supply route as well for redeployment of forces, munition, for evacuation of wounded, and so on. Furthermore, don't forget that the Russians during the previous days established complete artillery and FPV and Lancet control over this small road between, let's say, western part of Karlovka water reservoir and eastern part. So what I'm trying to tell you is that every single road, every single supply line in this area either destroyed or under complete Russian control. The southern line, this one was destroyed. Umanskaya bridge was destroyed. The western one was destroyed. The bridge between Mezhovo and Kamyshivka destroyed. This area is under complete fire control. And there is just one road, one way that Ukrainians can use, let's say, to support their forces in this area is the bridge and the road between the northern and the southern part of Novoselovka-Pershe. This is it. Currently, at least during April, we haven't received even a single video that tell us that the Russians managed to destroy the bridge, so most likely the Ukrainians still have possibilities to use this area, but something tells me that if the situation is correct and if the configuration and if everything we discussed right now is correct, then most likely during the next few days, or maybe the Russians have already destroyed the bridge, and then the Ukrainians who are currently located in the fields will be encircled and will get inside of a cauldron. Of course, the Ukrainians will have possibilities to cross the river. It's not like the Black Sea, it's just a river, it's just a small rivers, and most of Ukrainian soldiers will be able to cross these areas because, for example, in this part of Vovcha River, most likely the Ukrainians can do this even on their feet, but the Ukrainians have already lost possibilities to evacuate the most important artillery systems, warehouses, and armored vehicles. Everything will be left here, and of course the Ukrainians lost possibilities to support these vehicles and artillery systems. So, and when talking about the brigades, of course there are 61st Mechanized Brigade, there is 3rd Assault Brigade, 25th Airborne Brigade, probably 47th Mechanized Brigade. So lots of very powerful and experienced forces have already entered the situation, appeared in the situation when they will lose every single armored vehicle they have. The final update from the direction, another video from Semenivka, where we can see another Russian flag raising above on some building. We see the Russian soldier who is mooring, and he is feeling himself very comfortable without any, let's say, problems, without any risk or being afraid that of any attack from the Ukrainian side. So the situation probably will be resolved very soon. Once again, 2 areas, 2 cauldrons, and probably significant losses from the Ukrainian side. Now we are moving to Krasnohorivka, the second, the most important area, and we received today probably one of the most important updates during the previous, let's say, months during the April. We remember that the Russians currently are in offensive state. They are storming the industrial zone in the central part, and today we got a lot of reports from this area, and according to different sources, reliable sources, Russian army reached Grand Alliance gas station in Krasnohorivka, a few meters from Sovietskaya Central Street. This is the gas station that was captured according to different mappers and different reliable resources. Lots of mappers, based on those updates, have already updated their maps showing the additional Russian progress, and most likely the Russians are trying to achieve few things on this direction. First, the Russians are trying to cut Central Street and to cut the high-rise fortification area with industrial zone. And most likely, another thing that the Russians are trying to achieve is by getting the central street, then the Russians would start moving to the west with the purpose to bypass the industrial zone from the north and either to encircle Ukrainians or to force them to fall back. The most important updates on Krasnohorivka direction is coming from this area. As you can see, these black lines is the fortifications and strongholds of the armed forces of Ukraine. And according to information we have, we received these updates from different reliable mappers and different reliable sources. The Russians, as a result of an unexpected attack, managed to break through the Ukrainian defense belt in this area and to establish control over this building, this stronghold, this one, and the network of the fortifications around the building. This building has a certain title. This is Minich House. This is it. This is fortifications by the name of Minich House, and this fortification was captured by the Russians. And all these trenches around were also captured by the Russians. Important thing to note is that there is a water barrier, Lazova River, that we can say split Krasnohorivka in two parts. And of course, most likely the Russians are not going to cross the river, but most likely the Russians are going to continue moving further to the west with the purpose to reach Kobzorna Street and to get this intersection of roads with the purpose to cut this bridge, and let's say to trap the Ukrainians inside of Krasnohorivka. So most likely we're about to see another cauldron in the area, and if the information with the Russian breakthrough in Minich House is confirmed, then most likely during the next 48 hours the Russians will move further to the west, let's say something like this, and when the Russians reach the area, Krasnohorivka will be collapsed, encircled, and significant number of Ukrainians will appear in a cauldron. Third possible cauldron on the one direction, Avdiivka direction. Significant results from the Russians. Most likely to be 100%, let's say, successful, the Russians will start moving to the west, to this, let's say, street, let's say to reduce the Ukrainian possibilities, and obviously lots of interesting updates are going to come from this direction as well. Now we are moving to the south. We haven't received anything from Novomikhailivka, just the operational pause. The Russians managed to establish control a few days ago. Now they need some time to, let's say, to prepare everything for further offensive to Konstantinovka, Praskovivka. Ugledar, after 2 weeks of probably pummeling the area, we see complete absence of updates. Maybe we're going to receive them tomorrow, but for now, nothing. As few updates from South Donetsk directions, the Russians are active in the vicinity of Prichistovka. FPV drone strikes, attempts to clear the tree lines between Prichistovka and Russian positions. Most likely, during the previous 24 hours, 48, there was some kind of rotation process, and the Russians were trying to break the Ukrainian rotation and just to break this process. Urozhaina, the Russians continue pummeling the central part of the stronghold by attacking the area with significant number of FABs. Now we see also that this is active area. The Russians are in offensive. This is not something like where we can see the positional battle. There is a real offensive from the Russian side, not so big, not so fast, not so massive as we can see in Avdiivka direction, Cheretsina, Krasnohorivka, but also the Russians are attacking, and they managed to achieve some results, and most likely during the next few days the Russians will continue moving to this line with the purpose to establish the farms, and this is the situation in the direction. Now we're moving to Zaporizhzhia area. We don't have nothing important, just Lmur strikes, artillery strikes, tower strike, nothing special, just the battles along the line of combat contact. Important video is coming from Zaporizhzhia. On this video, from Dnipro more precisely, on this video we can see how the Russians managed to discover another ammo depot in the temporary position of the armed forces of Ukraine. According to information we have, the Russians managed to discover the base of the foreign, let's say, forces use of foreign volunteers of NATO countries, and as a result of attack, the entire area was covered and destroyed. Lots of vehicles were destroyed, and then, according to the Russians, the Ukrainians were forced to change their positions and to redeploy everything that managed to survive. Now we are moving to Kherson, and I must say that Kharkiv, let's say episode 2 to be, the Ukrainians will start offensive operation because they don't have any other option. If we increase the numbers of this since the beginning of April, we can see significant Ukrainian, let's say, focus with FPV drones on the area from Kazachie, Lahiri, Krinki, Karsunka, and then to Kakhovka, Nova Kakhovka. The area was under very heavy FPV drone fire. The Russians also started bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions in Ivanovka, which also we can use an evidence that the Russians understand the situation. The Russians see the concentration of Ukrainian Marines along Dnipro River, and they start bombing and attacking their concentration once again, as they used to do 2-3 months ago during the active battle for Krinki. Now the Russians start doing the same, and the most important today, probably after a very long pause, we start receiving the videos of how the Russians once again start hunting the Ukrainian boats. Significant number of boats with Ukrainian infantry, with Ukrainian Marines who were sent to Krinki. Another, let's say, episode of suicide clashes on the direction, and we see another boat arrived on the bank. The infantry landed, and Ukrainians once again try to develop their foothold here. Currently, we don't know for sure the number of Ukrainian forces in Krinki, but they will try to increase the critical mass. And the sources reported on the ground, the pro-Ukrainian sources reported that currently along Dnipro River, the Ukrainians have concentrated up to 2,000 Marines, experienced, well prepared by the Western countries, fully equipped by the Western countries, 2,000 Marines. Also, they have been redeployed here probably for the previous 2-3 months. And also today, the sources reported that another 4,000 Marines arrived in the area, and most likely, according to information we have, the Ukrainians will try to attack Kakhovka and Nova Kakhovka, this area, because the Dnipro is very small right now, and according to information we have, at some, let's say, areas, you can see the surface, and you can see the surface, and you can move through Dnipro River without any barriers, due to this fact that Dnipro is very low right now. The level of Dnipro is very low, and you can see the surface, and you can walk on the surface, and you can cross Dnipro right now without any problems. So this is the situation. The Ukrainians will attack this area because they need to establish control over high-rise area, because this is the only, let's say, positions where they can hold their foothold for a very long time. Obviously, the Russians see everything, but we'll see what is going to be next. Now let's return back to Chasiv Yar. We have no activity in this area another day, just the pummeling of the area, bombings with all types of weapons the Russians have. Probably the third or fourth day in a row the Russians conduct artillery preparation without any attempts to attack this area on the ground. The Russians also control the main supply roads, trying to reduce the supply and support that Ukrainians send from one bank of the canal to another, but for now, no operation on the ground. Currently, we can't tell for sure when exactly the Russians are planning to do this, but now we have what we have. Sever's directions, according to information we have, the Russians entered Razdolovka, and we see a certain very heavy activity in the vicinity of Sporne. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians were bombing the Ukrainian strongholds in the area and trenches with RBK 500. The Russians were bombing this area with, let's say, tall flamethrower systems, and the Russians were clearing this area with FPV drones. So if we increase the numbers of this since the beginning of months, we're going to see that the Russians were very focused in the area, and the Russians saw no resistance from the Ukrainian side. So most likely during the next 72 hours, the Russians will make first attempts to attack Sporne once again from the south, from the north. Interesting details we are continue receiving from Verkhneykamyanska. The Russians were pummeling this area as well with different types of weapons, including RBK 500, artillery rounds, multiple launch rocket systems, flamethrower systems, and the Russians were bombing the, let's say, northeastern, let's say, small part of Verkhneykamyansk as well. Most likely during the next few weeks, the Russians will try to attack this area along this road and along this road, including, let's say, capturing of the stronghold, let's say, between Zolotaryevka and Verkhneykamyansk itself. Belogorovka, no changes during the previous days. South in Kupinsk direction, no changes. Central Kupinsk direction, just few more missiles arrived in the area. Currently, we can't make any conclusions based on that. Maybe the Russians just discovered some headquarters and destroyed it. We have some Russian activity in the vicinity of Stelymachovka. We have report that the Russians launched an offensive, and then we have report of how the Russians were bombing the Ukrainian positions. Currently, not so many updates to make, let's say, reliable conclusions. South in Kupiansk, we have the picture of a fire anomaly, which confirms that the Russians destroyed a very big ammo depot to the south of Kupiansk. We have the consequences of Russian missile strike in Balaklia. Most likely the Russians attacked the railway station with the Ukrainian soldiers there. Kharkiv direction, we have reports that the Russians continue concentration of forces along the borders. Currently the sources are saying that the Russians are intensifying their artillery strikes in the area, and most likely after the victory, let's say May holidays, the Russians will launch an offensive. From the other side, we see more and more convoys of Ukrainian light vehicles heading to the border. Few things that you need to note that I would like to point your attention. First of all, we don't see heavy armored vehicles, just light Humvees. And as you can see, the Ukrainians stopped using the railways. The Ukrainians just using light vehicles because they understand if they use railways, they will be destroyed as a result of fire. So the situation is very difficult, but let's say regarding the situation in Ukraine, important updates are coming from China. Today there was negotiations between Xi Jinping and the Antony Blinken, the 71st United States Secretary of State, and they were talking a lot, and the United States were trying to force China to stop supporting Russia. But according to information we have, the negotiations failed, and China will continue supporting Russia, and we have some statements from Antony Blinken himself. So China is the main supplier of machinery, microelectronics and cellulose to Russia. According to US Secretary of State Blinken, Russia is using Chinese products to build up its military industry. Beijing will not be able to achieve improved relations with Europe by supporting the greatest threat to European security since the end of the Cold War. So the negotiations failed. The US tried to convince China to stop helping Russia, but from the other side we got report that in a month, less than in a month, Putin will go to China as well, and most likely he will receive the message that Blinken tried to send to Putin through Xi Jinping. So a lot of very interesting updates. Maybe we're talking about negotiations. Maybe let's say United States of America were trying to force China to stop support Russia, because today we also got very important report from Russia. And according to the Western, let's say, analytics, Germany Ministry of Defense stated that Russia already produced surplus military equipment. That means that the current needs of the front line, of Russian frontline, Kupiansk, let's say Donets, Avdiivka, Kherson, Zaporizhzhia directions, is less that Russia can produce. So Russia currently produces more than Russian army can use. And this is crazy. This is crazy. Russia can produce more than they use on the line of combat contact. And this situation can lead to two situations. First of all, the Russians can start working on their warehouses, trying to restore their mighty, let's say, warehouse mighty before the 2022, or the Russians have possibility to open few more front lines and to start using the super plus production. Very interesting updates. And probably that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.